Workers have begun excavating a massive hole directly outside Parliament in the Canadian capital on July 30th, 2020. Well, when we refer to excavating, on that day, a remarkable construction project began, which is still underway beneath the nation's most significant structure. Soon after, there was another explosion, then another, and 3 years later, this was the outcome. Canada's version of Big Ben looms over the edge of a massive abyss. All of this is taking place right now because the future of the country's most valuable asset, a structure that has guided its development over the past century, is at stake. And we've only just started this enormous dig. Which 3 Canadian cities would you choose if we asked you to list them? Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal would most likely be included. In terms of metropolitan area, they do have the largest populace. Don't overlook Ottawa, though. It has been the nation's capital since the 1800s, after all. Because of its proximity to the Ontario-Quebec border, Queen Victoria selected it. It is the meeting point between the French-speaking and English-speaking districts. Additionally, the fact that it was encircled by woodlands made it easier to resist against any American attack, as if that were ever going to occur. Each year, we spend hundreds of billions to safeguard it. They have access to our military. They ought to be a state. Canada needed a location for their parliament in order to solidify their recently acquired federal status. Here, on a hill with a view of the Ottawa River, is where they chose to place it. It would be composed of 3 distinct structures or blocks, the largest of which would be positioned in the center of a big lawn. The House of Commons and Senate chambers, as well as MP offices, ceremonial areas, and a library, were to be housed in this central block. Although construction started in 1859 and was completed 17 years later, its lifespan was to be somewhat brief. The building was destroyed in a massive fire in 1916, the exact cause of which is still unknown. The Library of Parliament is the only surviving institution. In short order, a new center block was put into service. This one was completed in 1927 and lasted much longer. It is still standing today, in fact. It was constructed in the Gothic Revival style, just like the original, and its outside was decorated with friezes, gargoyles, and grotesques. However, it wasn't merely a copy. The Peace Tower, which was 70% taller than its predecessor, was constructed to honor those who lost their lives in the First World War. It is only a few meters shorter than London's Big Ben and has 53 bells. Guys, don't try to outdo us at parliamentary buildings. Remain focused on the hockey. Even while the structure may still be intact, it has undergone significant deterioration over the past century. Surveyors discovered water infiltration in multiple places, degraded concrete supports, and some structural steel that was starting to corrode and deteriorate. Additionally, it is today thought to be susceptible to dangers that were probably not a major concern in the 1920s. The building is not earthquake resistant, and to answer your question, yes, earthquakes do occur in Canada. Although they are mostly modest, there have been a few over magnitude 7 in the past. Anywhere close to Ottawa, another one of them could be disastrous for a structure like this, which is composed of more than 24 different kinds of stone. Additionally, it doesn't have the kind of extremely high security you would anticipate for a site of this significance. Additionally, even though Parliament Hill receives over 3 million people annually, there isn't much for them to see or do, and it can get crowded. Because of this, the center block is currently halfway through a $5 billion renovation and structural reinforcement project. It is the biggest and most complicated undertaking of its sort in the history of the nation, and Public Services and Procurement Canada is in charge of it. Half of that front yard is gone, so all you have to do is look across it to realize the scope of the situation. For the time being, a 23-meter deep trench that runs the length of the structure has taken its place. 40,000 truckloads were required to remove the material after explosives were employed to break through the bedrock. The blasting process started in 2020 and was finished in 2023. What the devil is all that for, then? The purpose is to make space for a large subterranean welcome center. In a moment, more on it. Concrete is being poured by the beginning of 2025 for the components of the new center that must be installed first, including the elevator shafts, walls, and staircases. However, the most challenging aspect of the excavation project is still to come. The main structure, which presently has no subterranean levels at all, must be extended beneath the Welcome Center. More than a century after the structure was first built, they have chosen to add some. In order to protect the building from earthquakes, a base isolation system will now be erected concurrently. The entire center block needs to be detached from its foundation in order to accomplish this. Naturally, that isn't easy. The center block must be completely supported before any significant excavation is carried out. Before the building is placed on top of a new structural grid made of steel and reinforced concrete, everything is being placed on temporary poles. In order to form columns, about 800 piles are being driven into the earth and grouped together with steel bracing. The basement levels will then start to rise from the bottom up when workers dig down between these columns. Then it's time for the more than 500 base isolators. They will be positioned between the new foundation and the building's base. Essentially, their role is to keep the building apart from the planet it is situated on. During an earthquake, they serve as enormous shock absorbers. Although base isolators are not new, we have seen them put beneath massive telescopes and nuclear fusion reactors. This is the first time they have been done so. Although it's a tremendous engineering achievement, it's by no means the only significant obstacle that employees on this site must overcome. While the 4 pinnacles around the top of the Peace Tower were being repaired, specialists were called in to secure them. They accomplished this by abseiling across the clock faces and wrapping big straps from the flagpole's base around each pinnacle to keep them steady. It's crucial, since we are aware of the consequences of failing to repair a damaged clock tower pinnacle. Don't worry, we won't show you the rest, because it's terrible and only occurs in tiny English communities. Returning to Ottawa, those courageous men installed monitors to measure vibration during construction while they were hanging out at the top of the tower. Since it wouldn't be ideal for a restoration project to inflict more harm than good, over 500 of these have been positioned throughout the site. A different team is working to restore the stones that comprise the exterior lower below. 365,000 of them. This is much more time-consuming than cleaning your patio. Fortunately, though, they have access to more than just a power washer. Lasers. Really? Yes. This crew is equipped with instruments that vaporize surface deposits using concentrated high-energy light, removing dirt without damaging the stonework. The center block has been reduced to its structural components, and over 20,000 heritage artifacts are being restored and preserved. Some of the 50 rooms being renovated have one-of-a-kind, priceless artwork. Additionally, about 250 stained glass windows are receiving much-needed touch-ups. The ornamental arts team is another group that has been moving from east to west throughout the structure. They are inspecting the hundreds of statues that are practically everywhere you turn, and fixing any that have been damaged by weathering and erosion over the years. Thus, a tremendous lot of work is being done here, from the most intricate artistry to heavy drilling and reinforcing. However, you may be wondering where the regular attendees have disappeared to. High-ranking officials, such as senators and MPs, are more likely to wear suits than construction high-vis vests. For the time being, they had to move out. It makes some sense that the Senate is operating out of the Senate of Canada building, while the House of Commons has moved to the West Block, and it will be some time before they can return. The center block won't fully reopen for another year after this project is finished in 2031. The public, and Mark Carney and his colleagues, will be able to see the magnificent new Welcome Center in all its splendor when they are eventually allowed to return. Outside the main building, a new elevated pathway will allow visitors and lawmakers to enter. They will enter the main hall, where the Peace Tower's base is part of the main design, after going through a safe screening area. Through the skylights that illuminate the new area, they will be able to see the top of it as well. The center will serve as a safe and convenient front door to Parliament, with links to the west and east blocks. Regarding the center block itself, Canadians will receive a gem that has been completely modernized and refurbished, prepared for another century of use. It's clear why historic structures need to be maintained. You know what? When we look at projects like this, we're not just talking about fixing what's broken. We're talking about something much bigger. This is an opportunity to make sure it can endure whatever the future brings, not just to patch up a crumbling icon, but to rebuild it stronger than it ever was before. That's what real construction is about. It's about vision. It's about building for the next generation, not just surviving until tomorrow. Whether we're talking about bridges, buildings, or even our financial foundations, the principle is the same. You don't just patch the cracks. You engineer solutions that can weather any storm. And speaking of building something that lasts, If this kind of forward-thinking content resonates with you, make sure to subscribe to the Ultimate Construction video channel. Hit that notification bell, because we're not just covering projects here, we're covering the mindset that builds empires. I'll see you in the next one. Keep building.